One of the many challenges I think people like you have, right, is helping to generate more interest and more enthusiasm, and helping people see the connection between all of these societal things that they want to change, and the power that they have in promoting those through political advocacy.
Welcome to the podcast, Senator Ben Allen. I'm so happy to have you
Nice to
here.
be here. Thanks for having me.
The first question I want to ask you is, it's such a sacrifice to serve. And I like to call it, with my actors, living out loud, serving the greater good. So I'm wondering what your first calling was.
Well, for me, it's been just a great opportunity to give back, to actually represent my own home community, and to be able to serve and help to think through vexing problems. I guess I love the mix of meaningful work, how eclectic it is. It's very connected to my own life and that of my family, and then of course it's really interesting, and so I get to. That's what's always attracted me to this kind of work. Now I will say, I've always had a little bit of a love-hate relationship with politics, because I guess I kind of struggled with whether I wanted to put myself through it and deal with all the downsides, which I think I'm happy to talk about, but as a lot of people can guess. Um, but
Yeah,
it continues to keep me engaged and feel really meaningful.
that's so great. I mean, when I ask artists, like, what was your calling? What was the first thing? It usually starts early in childhood. And sometimes it's a grandiose vision, sometimes it's a fantasy, and sometimes it's just that feeling in your gut like, I need to make a difference with my life.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've always just been really interested in big public questions. I mean, ever since I was a
Mhm.
kid, I mean, love reading about history and and conflicts, and mediation, and all those kind of. I mean, I remember being really interested in diplomacy and the United Nations.
Wow.
Just as a younger person. So, um, yeah, There's this book at the library, like a UN A to Z, and I remember just poring over that. And I love learning. I love thinking about how people get along and how they not get along. And so,
Mm.
yeah, it's I you know so this kind of work always attracted me as an idea. Of course, the devil's in the details a little bit. And as I got a little bit older and I got to realize how all the downsides, I grappled with whether I wanted to actually do this. But opportunities presented themselves, and I went for them. And yeah, here I am.
I love that. I love that. And you're so involved with the things that make my life exciting and my viewers, which are arts, education in the arts, and making production possible in California. Do you want to talk a little about that?
Yeah, well, I'm an Angelino. My mom is a working artist. My dad had been a professor for many years at UCLA. Actually, taught Shakespeare and theater and a lot of other topics.
Wow.
So for me, it was deep in my bones. Um, you know, I also am so acutely aware, obviously, of how important the arts are to not just California, but especially Los Angeles economy. And I've been chair of the Joy Community of the Arts for a long time. We've had regular hearings of the folks from Otis who write the Otis report about the creative economy and how immensely important it is for the LA economy. And so many of my constituents are either directly in arts jobs, or in jobs that are you know, connected to the arts, whether it be Hollywood,
Hmm.
cultural issues, um, TV production, you know, um, arts districts. There's writing. There's this massive range of creative jobs that really help keep Los Angeles going. And so for me, it's not
Hmm.
only a matter of how do we uplift the human spirit and all of the wonderful benefits that the arts and culture bring to us as human beings, but also the hard facts of how dependent we are on a vibrant creative economy for our broader regional growth and quality of life. And so it's part of why we need to continue to fight to keep a lot of that work in LA and in California, and how we also need to invest more in helping to keep our cultural life vibrant.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, this current time that we're in with the Writers Guild strike has turned us all into activists.
Yeah.
political activists, humanitarians, fighting against corporate greed. Like, if you didn't take a stand on things before, you really take one now as an artist. So I'm wondering how you're feeling about this strike and how it's affecting your constituents.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I'm I'm strikes are always hard. They're hard on a region. I was just talking to a friend who's an actor and a member of SAG, which, by the way, could very well be going on strike soon
June
too.
30th.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. So, you know, I'm, and it was we had a long conversation about. We were at a wedding last weekend actually, and we chatted quite a bit about this topic. And from his perspective, obviously, a massive strike like this is really hard on everybody involved because the work stops and people need the work, they need the money, they need, it's part of, it's everything for them, and yet
Hmm.
nearly everybody in the business recognizes how important it is for regular folks in the industry to push back against some of these big trends that really threaten to bury so much of the human creativity in the system, whether it's the growth of AI, whether it's
Hmm.
making sure that we're figuring out a compensation system to ensure that everybody that works to make Hollywood work are getting a fair deal. And one thing he kept saying, and it really resonates with me, is that most people who work in and around Hollywood don't need. We were in a very fancy place at the time. It was a beautiful wedding venue. He said most people don't need to live like this. They just want to be able to afford a modest place to live, and a decent enough salary to put food on the table and pay for cable
And to
and
do,
you know
yeah, do what they
do
love.
what they love, and
Yes.
and they're not asking for
Hmm.
a lot of compensation, but they're asking for a reasonable compensation given how much money is in the system, how much joy, something. He's made the point that something like a third of all English speakers on planet Earth have a Netflix account. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but the point he was making was that there's immense cultural impact and commercial commercial reach of the industry. And the central question is how do we ensure that all the people who make this industry so successful, so vibrant, how do we make sure that they're making a decent salary to be able to live their lives? And
Hmm.
that's what this is all about.
Yes, absolutely. Do you feel this will have a trickle down effect in terms of people getting involved with standing up against corporate greed? And do you think it will strengthen unions in other areas at the end of the day?
And I think part of, in general, you're seeing a lot more interest in folks asking much more fundamental questions about the system that we have. That a lot of younger people, especially, saying, "Hey, the system is leading to massive inequalities. Uh, you know, people are asking for their fair piece of our economy and of our system." And so you're starting to see a lot more interest in unionization efforts in businesses, all sorts of different types of businesses. I mean, we've seen the efforts underway in Amazon and Starbucks and
Mm-hmm.
other types of companies. And then I think you're also seeing a lot of people, getting more interested in supporting policies that create a kind of a more fair, more equitable distribution of our society's wealth, and and ensuring that those people who are contributing so much to the richness of our economy and the richness of our society get compensated for that contribution. And that's ultimately, as I say, this is what this is all about. And I think you are absolutely starting to see a lot more interest in our general population, in both the unionization efforts, but also broader policies that seek to address some of these massive inequalities.
And hopefully those younger generations will go to the voting polls.
And you're
Uh,
starting to see a lot of that.
mhm, mhm,
But of course, it's a mixed bag, and you also have a lot of cynicism out there. And so,
mhm.
one of the many challenges I think people like you have, right, is helping to generate more interest and more enthusiasm, and helping people see the connection between all of these societal things that they want to change, and the power that they have at the voting booth, and through political advocacy.
Mhm. And in the power through art, through expression,
Oh,
and bringing to your audiences, engaging them with new ideas about changing society, changing life is very powerful in storytelling to be able to have that ability. I
yep.
train politicians I train politicians in public speaking and in communicating. And I've heard you speak publicly. You're a natural. But I'm wondering, how did you learn? And I know you have some acting experience, I'm told.
A little
So
bit,
I'm wondering,
yeah.
how did you how did you find your comfort zone? Do you feel that it's helpful for elected officials and candidates to be trained?
Oh, I do, and a lot of it's because a lot of this stuff isn't. I mean, for example, right now I went through a training myself, and I'm looking right at the camera as opposed to looking at you, which is a weird thing because natural human tendency is to look someone in the eye, but when we're talking on a computer, you're not actually right in front of me. You're hundreds of miles away in Southern California. I'm in Sacramento right now in my office, right? So there's things like this where you have to understand the medium. I mean,
Hmm.
just like television, right? It's not a natural form of communication. Uh, Natural communication, at least from is face to face, and yet now the most important way for that we find that we communicate to each other is through technology.
Hmm.
Even if I'm giving a speech to a group of regular people, that speech will then be videotaped, and then people will watch the video. They'll watch the YouTube, whatever. So in some respects, that's just as important as the interpersonal communication that you have face to face with somebody. And so helping people who are professional communicators understand that dynamic and learn how to use different type of media is immensely important because it helps them be more effective and better communicators.
And how about my piece is helping people to relax and be authentic and personalize? Is that something that came natural to you, or you had to get the courage to do?
I think it's about being aware. I mean, that was something that I worked on as well in the training that I did, was talking about a little bit of vulnerability, authenticity. How do you speak from the
Hmm.
heart? Oftentimes politicians can get very nervous and focused on, okay, I've got to deliver these talking points. And that can come
Hmm.
across as very stultified and too constrained. And people ultimately really
Yes,
want to they want to hear from real human beings.
real people, right? My mentor David Lee Strasberg said this weekend in a class, vulnerability is a power move.
Yeah, yeah,
I,
sure. Yeah, I
I
think
love
that's
that.
right. That's right. Isn't that
Yeah.
funny? I mean, it's a little counterintuitive again,
Hmm.
but I totally agree.
Yeah. Have to ask you or brag about you, or you can brag about the great work you're doing with our climate here in Southern California, on a host of different issues. What's the most current one that you want to share?
Gosh, well, we've been obviously trying to keep California at the front of the global conversation on climate change, and we've been pushing for more aggressive standards so as to ensure that we're making progress on meeting our climate goals. And that has to do with accelerating the transition to newer, cleaner energy.
Mm.
And it has to do with reducing our dependence on fossil fuels across the board. Everything from reducing our dependence on single-use plastics to oil and gas as an energy source. And so, I just literally the reason why I'm a little late to this podcast actually is because we were just in conversations over the governor's infrastructure proposals, which seek to streamline various energy projects, among other things. And one of the concerns that we have is that we really focus the streamlining that we provide on environmentally beneficial projects. But it's about ensuring that we really keep our eyes on the prize, and that
Hmm.
we just keep pushing. The great opportunity here is that California's got such a big economy. We actually have a pretty incredible physical space. We've got deserts and mountains and agricultural land and coastline and wind and solar and
Mm.
geothermal opportunities, lithium. I mean, there's so many things within the state of California. And if we figure out a way to craft policies that can actually be scaled, because in the end of the day, as much as we may want to adopt really great climate policies for California, if the policies that we adopt don't influence other jurisdictions to adopt similar policies and don't help to scale
Mm.
the new technologies of the future that will be able to be adopted in other places, then we will have failed, because California could have zero greenhouse gas emissions, and yet if the rest of the world isn't doing the same, then we're still going to be feeling the effects of global warming. So we have a special place in this conversation in that sense that we've got the will, we've got the ingenuity, we've got the physicality. There's aspects of our physical geography that can help us to be a leader, and we've got the incredible talent. I mean, all the startups and the universities, and so California is uniquely positioned to lead the world toward this transition that's going to help to save our planet.
Wow. Save our planet, stuff that superhero movies are made of.
It's scary because things are vulnerable.
You are doing it. It is. I know it is. It's you can't write this stuff.
Yeah.
We're not an island. We need the rest of the world. We only have a few minutes left, and I don't know where to move to now, except that there are two things that really interest me. You passed something called SB 916, where educators get credentials for teaching.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little about that?
Well, so I've been chairing the Joint Committee on the Arts, and we were really interested in trying to take some tangible steps to help improve arts education in our schools. It's something that's been near and dear to my heart for a long time. And it turned out that many, many years ago, as a result of literally one word in code, theater and dance, we got rid of the standalone teaching credentials for theater and dance, even though they were separate places in the arts curriculum. So you could have a PhD in theater, and you'd have to go get a separate English credential just to be able to teach theater. Or similarly, you could be a doctorate in dance, and you have to go get a separate a credential in physical education to be able to teach dance. And so, we figured out that there was this problem. We needed to rectify it, and we went out there and convinced the legislature. But part of the really beautiful thing here was that the California Teachers Association, who represent the teachers, the union that represents the teachers, had traditionally been opposed to any changes in this area. They didn't like changes in the credentialing. But once we started this effort, the arts teachers went out there and convinced their colleagues at the California Teachers Association that their opposition to this change was just, counterproductive. And they took to the floor of the California Teachers Association convention hall and convinced the association, member by member by member, to switch the position. And once they dropped their opposition, the bill flew through. And it was a great example of tenacity, but also just, just grease. There's just people out there, elbow grease, getting out there. Teachers talking peer to peer, teacher to teacher, convincing each other and educating each other about the need for this change. And it's great.
Welcome back to Diary of an Actress. My guest today is California State Senator Ben Allen.
And it's a beautiful thing.
We had such a wonderful conversation because our senator is so involved in the film industry, in arts education. We talked about the Writers Guild strike. We talked about the importance of art, and we also squeezed in all the exciting progressive things he's doing on climate change. Enjoy the podcast.
Now, of course, there are bigger factors at play, right? There's interest groups, and there's public relations, and there's unfortunately the tide of politicization and polarization that really do influence the process too. People get very wedded to their side of the ledger, and as much as we get along much more collegially up here in Sacramento in the Capitol than the folks in Washington, some of the national polarization does find its way into our conversations, and that's always unfortunate. But that all being said, we're small. There's enough collegiality here where we actually are able to work together, and those personal relationships do matter. And I find myself, it's always exciting when you can partner with someone from a very different part of the state, or with someone. There's been several times where I've been able to partner up with a Republican member on an issue where we saw eye to eye, and that's always really heartening. It kind of, it's especially given all of the terrible conflict, the division
right,
that seems to dominate so much of our politics right now.
I'm so happy to hear that. That makes me feel really good. All right, I have to let you go, but where can we find you? You have an Instagram.
Yeah. So we're at Ben Allen
Twitter,
CA. So BenAllen CA. And check us out. And then I've got, obviously, if you want to, our offices are always open. We've got a wonderful team both in LA and in Sacramento. So in Los Angeles, the number is 310-318-6994. And in Sacramento, it's 916-651-4024. We've also, you can check us out online, but please be in touch. We're always looking for ways to help constituents. Literally over the last few years, we were doing a little bit of a study on this. During the pandemic, especially, thousands and thousands of constituents called us, many of whom were in really desperate situations, whether it been unemployment insurance or challenges of a small business owner trying to get a loan during the pandemic. And we were able to help them through all of these issues. And we continue to have a really robust constituent services operation. I just encourage folks, if you've got any issue with the state government, please don't hesitate to call us. We'd love to help.
Okay. Thank you for the generous offer. So happy to have you here. Looking forward to all the great things you're going to continue to do and do in the future. And thank you so much for your time today.
Appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Good seeing you.
Thank you. You too.
All right.
Thank you, Senator Allen. I am very inspired and comforted that you are in office protecting the arts, protecting our climate, and all the other important things in Southern California and in the world. If you'd like to hear more of my podcasts, please go to diaryofanactress.com. Until the next time, stay inspired.